Grüezi ragazzi, willkommen and bienvenue to today's live. Today I'd like to try and use Abbas this half an hour that we have together for talking together with one of our guests, myself, on the topic of Myrcene. I'm pretty sure that many of you have been hearing a lot the whole conversation on terpenes, but then the actual science is very seldomly finding a space for debate, and hopefully this is actually the attempt that I will try and do today. Sorry guys, I'm just arriving into from technical problems into this. So let's jump into all the areas that I like to cover today. Obviously this is two huge areas, and when you look at them from a cellular perspective, talking about pain and inflammation, it doesn't seem so strange that then I included such different and multifarious target pathologies like dermatitis and inflammation of the pleura, of the inner lining of the lungs. These targets that I put in there here, the reason I am gonna try and discuss all of these things today is because they have something in common, and they're fil rouge, and it's actually the activity that Myrcene has been showing to have on different aspect of nociception and perception of pain and inflammation. The reason I included as well a sort of all around holistic, and so also the mood aspect with some example of studies, for example, of the activity of Myrcene as a compound that could perhaps substitute benzodiazepines in the context of anxiety and sleep disorders is because in 2023, at this point, it's quite evident that um, the psyche and the whole alternation of sleep and sleep disturbances or mood disturbances, they are not just comorbidity of a pain sensation, but they, in some instances, are a driving factor of the pain itself. And so I think it's important to look at the activity of this compound. And today we'll look at Myrcene, and hopefully in the next times we'll look at other compounds that are present in the cannabis plant. But to look at the activity of this compound from truly an holistic, integrative way in which we don't need to separate the periphery of the body and the central nervous system, and so the centrally central effects. I will try as well and touch one of the most debated topic of Myrcene, which is that of the big question mark on his mechanism of function on pain, and whether or not is centrally mediated its activity or just it's a peripheric analgesia. So we have a lot of stuff to discuss, and I will try to do my best to stay in the time. Obviously, I'll keep an eye for your questions, and I'll try and get onto them by the end of the live. So feel free to write, and then I'll check that out. So as you can see from the image, this is a monoterpene. So what's a monoterpene? Basically, it's, in this case, these are two isoprenes, as you can see. It's an acyclic monoterpene, and it's pretty common to be found in nature. So we know it's for the cannabis plant, but it's pretty common for the essential oil of lemongrass. It's common in hop. It's common in verbena, mango, thyme, bay, cannabis sativa. As I said, is probably one of the most prominent monoterpenes. And as you can see from the structure, and also from the fact that, as I said, it's a monoterpene, it has an extremely volatile nature. And this made it somehow kind of difficult to use it on its own. And at the moment, mainly it's used by the fragrance industry, actually. And it's used for the production of derivative terpenes. So it's like an in-between sort of terpene. It's important to say that it's been widely tested for safety. It's been investigated its genotoxicity, has been screened for salmonella, microsome assays, and in all of these tests, it over and over demonstrated that it is not a mutagenic compound. So, quite safe to say that myrcene, it is a compound that have been showing quite a lot of possibility to have beneficial effects and to be used in medicine. But I think one of the biggest blocker when we look at the literature of terpenes related with cannabis is that, of course, as you know, cannabis for various regulatory reasons is not the easiest plant to be given an ethical approval to be studying. And also, within the context of cannabis, terpenes are not considered the active pharmaceutical ingredients. So even adding even further difficulty in understanding and pairing, if you will, the effect of specific terpenes with specific target pathologies or target symptoms. But what we do have, it's thousands literally of years from what we can call as folk medicine, traditional medicine. And myrcene, as I said, it's abundant in nature. And so it's abundant in the plants that have been part of um, our shamanic medicines throughout a different part of the world. And literally, this is why I wanted to put together this kind of visual of your idea of from South America to Asia, how extensively myrcene has truly been part of our medicine. But the interesting part has been done when traditional, for example, traditional essential oils or traditional decoction started to be investigated and analyzed under the lenses of a scientist, under the modern scientist lens. And funnily enough, the traditional uses actually were quite spot on because there was a complete scientific rationale in their use. And so just to drive you a little bit through, this is compiling actually a lot of studies. I tried to summarize as well some of the references. If you manage to open up on the footer, you see I put in some references for you to go and extend your knowledge. But I find it really, really interesting, this essential oil that is obtained by the leaves of this Brazilian plant that is called the Rhamanthus erythropappus. And this has been tested left and right for its antinociceptive effects. Nocere from Latin means pain, to bring pain. So antinociceptive effects is basically analgesic effect. Actually, not really analgesic effect. The effect of not perceiving the sensation of pain. Obviously, when we look at an essential oil, we are not looking at a single terpene isolated, okay? We're looking at different terpenes that are interacting one with each other. In this case, the reason I added this essential oil to this list is because actually it includes a really high percentage of monoterpenes. And one of the most prominent monoterpenes that is present in this essential oil group is beta-myrcene. And with this oil have been done, first of all, studies to understand whether myrcene could activate analgesia of the first phase of pain, which is that acute, centrally mediated type of pain, and whether also terpenes, could have a role in that we call the second phase of pain, which is the wave of inflammation, basically, that wave of pain that we experience due to the inflammatory soup. And, well, little spoiler, it seemed to be effective in both cases. So if you wanna if you wanna skip to the results, but for who is interested on how actually this works, I find it quite fascinating when we manage to have a little bit of time to understand these models. And for example, one of the ways to understand the inflammatory the inflammatory um, well, the role of Myrcene into inflammation is has been done with, for example, a group of mice in this case that were induced pain reactions um, that could be analyzed under the lenses of inflammation and injected in their paw with an irritant with a chemical type of stimulation, and in this case was formalin. Um, Obviously, it's impossible to ask the animals to whether they are still in pain or not. So we need to understand from their behavior. And as anyone who has an animal in their house, a mammal in their house, know perfectly that when that animal is in pain somewhere, it will leak on the wound. So we get the point of inhibition of their sensation of pain from the moment that they stop licking their own paw. And these results were reached around 400 milligram per kilo of the use of this essential oil. So these results were reached basically. Um, Also, there are other tests that have been done still with the same Brazilian oil. And in this case, they were testing on we call it hot plate. A hot plate is a surface, usually around 55 to 56 degrees Celsius. And there, our understanding of how painful a stimuli is, it's actually seeing for how long an animal managed to stay on the surface, and this dictates basically the latency that that animal managed to stay on that surface. And usually, actually, this hot plate type of model allows us to investigate better whether there are centrally mediated effects. In this case, so the pain that comes from centrally mediated effect, the dose was halved to reach an inhibition of the pain. It was around 200 milligram per kilo. This only happened thanks to a sort of pre-treatment. So before the challenge on the hot plate, the animals were pre-treated with this essential oil, and obviously even there it was looked as well what was the timing that was the best and most efficient. Is it 30 minutes, is it 60 minutes, is it 90 minutes? And the best timing was 1 hour before. All of this information, the fact that a pre-treatment 1 hour before, the fact that there was an inhibition on a hot plate, and also are indication of the fact that these essential oil are managing to work through the central nervous system. So they're managing to have an effect on our brain centers of what is pain. To further understand the mechanism of action of these, obviously one of the first things that you compare an analgesic compound with is one of the most potent one, which is morphine, right? So one of the ways to understand whether this essential oil was functioning through the opioid system, the animals were pre-treated with a substance that is called naloxone. Naloxone is nothing else than basically an antagonist of opioid receptors, okay? So it blocks the opioid receptors, then you give morphine, then you let them stay on the hot plate. And what they saw is that with a pre-treatment of naloxone, boom, morphine was just bouncing on the receptor, so the mice could not actually hold the painful sensation of heat. On the other hand, though, with a pre-treatment of naloxone, none of the effects of the essential oil of Erymanthus erythropappus was blocked. So some, and this the reason I explain you all of this is because from here it started like a long debate over, debate for scholars over what is the mechanism of function for this type of terpenes in the management of pain. Because some said, well, if naloxone didn't block any of the effects, then it's not centrally mediated. And some others said it is centrally mediated, simply it's not directly stimulating the opioid system, which is kind of where I'm gonna try and lead you towards with if we manage to arrive to a point of the cannabinoid system. Um, Also, I think it's interesting to see still with this plant. I'm sorry, I'm still here. I'm still in the Eremanthus erythropappus. It's really fascinating, this essential oil, and quite a lot of literature has been done here. It also kind of added on even more evidence of the fact that myrcene and terpenes can also have an inhibition of what we call visceral pain. And in fact, another test that usually is done to test is it's injecting animals with another amazing irritant that is called acetic acid. And usually what you witness, it's what we call abdominal breathing. And this was completely inhibited thanks with the use of this essential oil at different dosages. This mechanism, it's elegantly and completely controlled by the cyclooxygenase pathway, the COX pathway, okay? But not only, also by the synthesis of prostaglandin. Prostaglandin, it's some of the main character of our so-called inflammatory soup. And both of them are inhibited by this oil. So, to further confirm this role of myrcene as an anti-inflammatory, I think it's worth looking at another uh, compound, let's say, which is nothing else than lemongrass tea. Okay, it's more than tea; it's a decoction, and also this was again used traditionally. And when science looks at it, wonders what's the rationale here in here? Should we really suggest this lemongrass tea, or does it make zero sense? And again, in this lemongrass tree, actually, myrcene was the main analgesic compound that was identified, and mainly for with this tea, peripheral effect were uh, mainly studied, and they all revolved around the capacity of myrcene to block the synthesis and the production of PGE2, so basically of prostaglandins. So basically, the pain that you have usually in what we call the second wave of inflammation. And so these studies are really cool because then when they arrive to the conclusion, they manage to reconsider what folk medicine has been doing, and also in this case is saying, well, Brazil, that amazing lemongrass tea that you've been using for hundreds of years, yeah, continue doing it because actually makes a lot of sense. But I don't want you to get mixed up with thinking that terpenes then only have peripheric effect. And that's why I started, and I also gave you some details about this experiment with the pre-treatment with naloxone. I know I'm going into some level of complexity, and perhaps I'm never going to be able in this live to show you all the slides that I put together because I'm getting a bit slow. But I think it's really important for you to understand what I'm writing here with the line in Germany, because if from one hand some studies show us that only has peripheric effect, on the other hand, and this is actually done on a clinical trial with humans. Actually, I should have the study here. Okay, this is the study. This is a study that has been run in Germany. As you know, hop decoction, what is it? I mean, it's not a beer because it does not contain alcohol, but it's kind of like it's like a beer with no booze sort of flavor. Okay, and and basically in this case was a tablet of valerian and hop. Why am I including this on myrcene? Because myrcene is the main component of both of these plants, so it is actually the active. It is one of the main actives of these two tablets, of these two plants, okay? Quite famous. But I think it's super interesting to see how two groups that with severe sleep disorders were hospitalized, and one group was given benzodiazepines, so not really like water, like benzodiazepines. The other group was giving um, these tablets of valerian and hop after 2 weeks. Basically, the results were comparable in terms of anxiolysis. Anxiolysis means the decrease. Actually, the from Greek, the actual translation would be how it melts the anxiety, and the sleep improvement. So less interruption during the night, and overall longer length of sleep. Now, the main difference between these two groups, what was it? That one group could basically interrupt the therapy and not really have too many terrible effects about that. The other group had a rebound effect and also obviously withdrawal. Sorry, I think someone decided to just write me all the messages, and it's really annoying in my ear. So, okay, okay, hopefully I managed. Okay. So this, it's an evidence that I wanted to include. I know we were talking about pain, but as I said, pain is not unrelated to sleep disturbances, A, and two, because I wanted to further bring you evidences of the fact that for sure it has central effects, because otherwise how could it act on our sleep disturbances and anxiety, right? So it must have some central effects. Now, I wanted to continue this kind of tour around the world with a plant from Mexico. This Mexican plant, Porphyllum ruderale, again, is used mainly with an essential oil, and also here the main monoterpene of this essential oil is Porphyllum ruderalis. In this case, the study was quite, and that's maybe brings you back to the slides I showed you before on the use of Myrcene even for pleurisy. What's pleurisy is, as I said, inflammation of the lungs lining, right? The pleura. This was created in a model, again, in animals. Usually what you inject in this case is LPS, which is lipopolysaccharide, and chymosan, so they can develop a kind of looking like type of pleurisy. And then it was assigned the injection of this essential oil. Usually this is done in subcutaneous. And I think here it was quite striking and very interesting to see how pretty much all the LPS-induced inflammation, especially including the cell migration, which is absolutely key feature of pleurisy, but generally of the inflammatory response, were blocked. And betamycin was shown to have, an immunoregulatory activity, because it was shown to be able to inhibit the production of nitrogen oxide, NO. It was shown to decrease the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, and like EL4, it's an interleukin. So all of these EL4, EFN, gamma, they're all hallmarks, let's say, interferon gamma. They're all hallmarks of overproduction of these interleukins during different inflammatory stages. In this case of lungs, but for example here, let's see, time is flying. I also put you, yes, okay, here it's a completely different pathology, it's osteoarthritis. And I know this may sound erratic for doctors, but for anyone that is used to look at cells, it kind of makes sense. So here, for example, we have kind of similar hallmark. EL1B, it's a interleukin B. And Myrcene, again, was shown to have quite a strong effect. Actually, was the terpene. This is a really interesting study, by the way. Congrats to who made it in University of Coimbra, if I'm not wrong, from Portugal. The previous study to this one was merely just looking at different essential oils and seeing that they did have a quite interesting effect in the decreasing the degeneration of cartilage in osteoarthritis. Okay, then their second question, which is the study I'm showing you here, was which terpene is the most important one to activate and drive this type of action. And so Myrcene was actually found to be the most important in this regard. And I find it interesting, and that's why I linked it to the one of Pleurisio before, because at the end, the players often are quite the same in terms of inflammation. But I think for anyone that is not super familiar with these acronyms, it's important to understand this, that not only there is an inhibition at the protein level, like inhibiting pro-inflammatory prostaglandin and cytokines, okay, but there is also, and this is what I'm saying here, with inhibition of necrosis factor KB and transcription factors, all of these MAP kinases, all of these kinases, what is all of this stuff? This, what I'm saying here, that there is also a inhibition at the genetic level. So is working at both at short term on the protein inhibition so that the inflammation doesn't continue, and then the signal is also sent back to the DNA and is saying, hey, look, maybe we should change things around, or we shouldn't continue producing all of this stuff that is actually quite detrimental for ourselves, because what you're seeing here that is produced from the chondrocytes, that are the cells that usually degenerate and start to, for example, you see decrease of collagen 1, but collagen 1, it's something that you don't want to produce, overproduce, because it's filaments that are going to block pretty much the density of the cartilage. So what the signal that you want is for the production of collagen 2. So all I'm saying is these compounds are showing evidence of working at different levels, short term and long term. Wow, the time is a the time is not helping me today. I have too many things I would like to share. I'm going back because I think our travel around the world also deserves to talk briefly about the magnolia, super famous flower. We all know it. You can make an essential oil out of that. Usually the 15% of the total terpene fraction of that is going to be myrcene, and this essential oil is, well, something related to magic, because it does not significantly inhibit the nitrogen oxide production and the prostaglandin production. No, it totally inhibits it. This is, of course, in vitro studies, studies that I have myself a lot been doing with these models on lipopolysaccharide and macrophages, for example, so immune cells. But it's quite impressive, and so that's why I wanted to show you briefly. And then for our travel around the world, let's go back and finish with Spain. I'm sure anyone living in Europe, I've seen this type of flowers as well. Can be in this umbrella-like, can be white or can be yellow. Apparently, traditionally, this I didn't know. I just studied from literature, but apparently, traditionally, there was a tradition to use essential oil from this flower that has a terrible to pronounce name. I'll try my best. Disticosialinum tenuifolium. And the reason I wanted to include this because in this flower truly is almost like looking at Myrcene as an isolate, because we're talking about 50 to 90% of the whole terpene fraction that is Myrcene. And also in this case, there is a significant inhibition of NO in the macrophages. So again, like significant evidences of anti-inflammatory activity from Myrcene. Right, we have very, very short time left. So what I can tell you here is basically just this, and perhaps I'm going to just take questions if you have any to look into these. But we know, and this has been patented as well, so we know that terpenes can, and in particular beta-myrcene, are patented as permeation agent. We know that they help cannabinoids be delivered into the bloodstream. We know that terpenes also decrease the blood-brain barrier resistance. So yeah, I don't think it's a matter of a question mark too much whether myrcene is acting centrally or not. We know that it also has an activity at cannabinoid receptors. What type of activity? It seems to have a sort of positive allosteric modulation at the CB1 receptor. So what it does, it changes the shape of the receptor and it allows that receptor to become kind of like, think of it like more magnetic for THC or for anything that is activating CB1. So quite interesting, because then if you put it in composition with high THC compounds, obviously you have the potential to increase these pain killing properties. But on the other hand, maybe you have the potential to increase these pain killing properties already just basically with an increase of captation of anandamide. This is a potential that may happen. And then the same idea I had to check out as well. This is from my old studies on whether myrcene could also work in conjunction in a similar way with CBD. So again, these are macrophages. I have been stimulating those cells with LPS. So they are stressed. They're fighting the war. Basically, it's an inflammatory state, and it's micromolar. Okay, it's used like that. And as you can see here, I am injecting, this is just measuring of calcium imaging. It's internal calcium. What it means is basically whether the cell is active or not. And as you can tell, after 30 micromolar of CBD, not even 5 minutes after, I just add 5 micromolar of myrcene, and this is substantially increased the response way more than actually each of the two on their own. So there is again the potential for this famous entourage effect to actually be taking place. This was a machine that I was using. Lots of glamour time in the darkness. And this is just to close before we say goodbye, to remind you that we're talking about a really, really volatile compound. Most UGMP floss is gamma irradiated from studies that have been conducted directly from bedrocan. Seems that some compounds, some especially like linalol and myrcene, so basically the monoterpenes, they decrease quite a lot, and in some instances even up to 40%. Obviously, it's not, I wrote it here, it's not a qualitative, it's not like chosen, oh, linalol will not be part of, no, but it decreased kind of like on all the qualities, but the quantity of terpenes, obviously. So sesquiterpenes are easier to be found in gamma irradiated, and then the post-production as well can heavily decrease the amount of terpenes that are present in the final formulation. So all of this is to say, think about what you're formulating. If you're a formulator, think about what you're prescribing if you're a prescriber, and ask me any question, because we are at the end of the session. Thank you. No, I don't see any. So probably I was clear, or I just destroyed everyone's brain. We are going to be live actually next Tuesday with one of the best scientists on the topic of pain, Professor David Finn. We're very honored. We will continue this conversation, not on myrcene, more on cannabinoids, and looking forward to see you for another LinkedIn Live next Tuesday, perhaps with a little bit less tech issues. And we'll be with Fabio and Professor David Finn. So thanks again, and have a good evening.